you can read all sorts of things in China about totalitarian. You can read Hannah Arendt's book on totalitarianism, which would be the kind of thing you're not supposed to be able to read that in a somewhat totalitarian state or a dictatorial state, if anything. But it's not specifically about China. And so censorship is most restrictive when it's things that are actually about China, things about leaders of the Chinese Communist Party. There's intense kind of censorship of that, and certain events in that way. But a sort of like something through allegory, something through imagining a place that looks a lot like a Communist Party ruled state so that people are going to read it. There were things that were banned throughout up until like the very last period of Gorbachev's rule. Things banned in the Soviet Union that are available in Chinese bookstores. You can buy 1984 in a Chinese bookstore. You've been able to since 1985. You can buy, again, it's not about China. And actually, for some people within China in the mid-1980s, where they focused on the part of 1984 that's like the 2 minutes of hate, these rituals of denunciation of people, for some people in China, it seemed like it was about their past, not about their present. And then by the 90s, 1984 is a very bleak culture of scarcity, a place where people just aren't having fun. And people said, like, you could read, some people would read 1984 and say, look, this is the world we're living in. It's a big brother state. But others said, well, that has some similarities to us, but, he wasn't talking about a country like ours. Look, we've got supermarkets, we've got McDonald's. I mean, this is not, we got fast trains, we're living so much better in some ways than our grandparents did. And this isn't like that bleak world he was imagining.
Yeah, you've actually spoken about and described China as more akin to the dystopian world of Brave New World than 1984, which is really interesting to think about. I think about that a lot. I've recently over the past couple of years, reread Brave New World a couple of times, and also 1984. It does seem that the 21st century might be more defined to the degree it is dystopian, any of the nations are, by Brave New World than by 1984.
There are mixed elements. I think there are moments when it can seem more one than the other, and there can be parts of the same country that seem more one than the other. I think, and if we just think about control through distraction and playing to your sense of pleasure. And one thing that people forget sometimes or don't know is that Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, taught Eric Blair, who became George Orwell when he was a student at Eton. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of rivals. And in fact, in 1949, Orwell sent his former teacher a copy of 1984 and said, look, I've written this. Basically, it's kind of almost a little Oedipal, like, I've written this book that displaces yours. He didn't say that. He just said, I want you to have this. But he had criticized Brave New World in reviews as like not having imagined a world of capitalism run wild like before realizing the kind of totalitarian threats of the middle of the 20th century. But Huxley wrote Orwell a letter in October of 1949, same month the Communist Party took control in China. Not that he mentions China. And he just said, it's a great book and everything, but I think the dictators of the future will find less arduous ways to keep control over the population. Basically saying more like what was in my book than in yours.
I have to say, I think Huxley might be really onto something there. Truly a visionary. Although to give points to Orwell, I do think as far as just a philosophical work of fiction, 1984 is a better book. Because Brave New World does not quite construct the philosophical message thoroughly. Because 1984 contains many very clearly, very poetically defined elements of a totalitarian regime.
Oh, and the dissection of language is just so amazing. No, I think you've got a point there. And I went back and reread Brave New World, and it's fascinating, but it's very messy.
Yeah.
I think there's a clarity to Orwell's 1984. There's a clarity to Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale. Similarly, the construction of the elements, and she was a big fan of both um, 1984 and Brave New World. So there's a way they go forward. But there was a kind of, it's not exactly a sequel, but Huxley did write something called Brave New World Revisited
Yes, he did.
in
That's
the
right.
50s, and he kind of said, actually, it seems, and he mentions China there. He says that in Mao's China, they're kind of combining the two things of this, and I'm really fascinated by that because they published in China, um, on the Chinese mainland. It was published in Taiwan and Hong Kong too. It's called the Dystopian Trilogy, and it's a box set where you have Zemiatin's We, who that inspired both Orwell and Huxley to some extent. That's one book, and then there's Animal Farm in 1984 is a second book. And then the third volume is Huxley's Brave New World and Brave New World Revisited. And it was published in complex characters. And you could buy it in Hong Kong. But I compared it to the book you can buy on the mainland, and it's all the same except the parts in Brave New World Revisited that refer to China are scalpeled out. And this, I think, shows the subtlety of the censorship system. You can buy these books and you can read about them, but the parts that really show you how to connect the dots, that's taken out. And I do think the Brave New World side of things, I think with China, I was feeling it was definitely moving more toward Brave New World, except Tibet and Xinjiang being more the crude boot on the face 1984 style of control. But then during the COVID lockdowns, when people were being so intensely monitored and controlled, even places like Shanghai, that had seemed much more the Brave New World kind of style, had their Orwellian moment. So you have it now. I think there are more 1984, more Brave New World parts of the country, and there are also more Brave New World, more 1984 moments.